In today's episode, we discuss the pair of Cedar Fair launch coasters that some would say are out of this world. Welcome to Airtime Traveler. How's it going, everybody? Welcome to the Roller Coaster History Podcast. You are listening to Airtime Traveler. My name is Nathan Grace, and I'm joined by my wife and lovely co-host.
Hey, I'm Haley Grace.
And thank you for tuning in to this episode of the podcast. It is impressive that we're here recording, if I'm being honest. So we've been talking for months that we're going to try to get ahead on our episodes, get, lots of stuff recorded ahead of time so that when the baby came, we had all this stuff, that we could just release in the meantime and take a break. Yeah, that didn't happen. Life has been just as crazy before the baby came as it's going to be after the baby comes. And
True that.
We're, not recording anything ahead of schedule. We're not recording this that far ahead of when you're listening to it. So just keep that in mind if, this episode that you're listening to is coming out on time. But if over the next 2 or 3 episodes there's delays, or maybe Haley's not there and I have someone else come in and do it with me, just keep in mind it's probably because we're on baby watch right now. Like, literally the baby could come tomorrow for all we know. Or tonight. Like,
I'm hoping for tonight.
It could literally come at any time. So that's where we're at right now. But anyway, we're here now. We made it for this episode.
We're here.
Yep, we're going to talk about... Yep. Haley made it.
Barely.
Well, I think if this year... Well, I guess I should introduce for those that may have not listened before.
Yeah, how dare you.
I know, how rude of me. If this is your first time listening to Airtime Traveler, each episode we take one roller coaster and dive into the history of that roller coaster. So rather than talking about the history of roller coasters in general, we're talking about, the history of one roller coaster and doing that every episode. So
Yep.
I'm a coaster enthusiast and have been for a long time, and my wife Haley is a member of the GP, or the general public. So I'm here to do the research and tell the stories, and she is here to listen and to make me more interesting. And that's how it goes here.
Word.
I'm
in a weird mood tonight.
Word.
So,
I think the only thing I wasn't going to talk about this week, I know, and people listening are probably even sick that I'm bringing this up, because it's literally been everywhere, but this even made it into the coaster enthusiast social media rounds this week. So the whole Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce thing, right?
Why are we talking about this?
Exactly my point. So that's been all over social media the past couple weeks, right?
Yeah.
Well, this week there were a couple of parks that got in on the joke. Like, there was a few of them that posted like a roller coaster, but like the 2 seats on the front said reserved for Taylor and reserved for Travis. And like most of them, I was like, okay, whatever. Like, Silver Dollar City posted one of 2 pumpkins that were carved, one with her face and one with his face.
I did see that.
That one, at least the Kansas City Chiefs are the home team of Silver Dollar City, so I can kind of get on board with that one. But the one that I saw this week that drove me crazy and drove a lot of other people crazy was Kings Island made a post, and the social media person or whoever was doing the post was holding 2 tickets. They were, fake or whatever, but it had their names on them. And they were like in the Diamondback station. It's like the perfect date or something like that. I don't know. And the problem is Kings Island is in Cincinnati.
Doesn't make any sense.
The Bengals hate the Chiefs. So the whole comment section was just, oh, get this out of it. Like all those Cincinnati people were just hated that they posted this thing with Travis Kelce.
Oh dear.
So yeah, know your audience, I suppose, is the only thing I would say there.
That's awkward.
So it's just crazy how much that's blown up that it even found its way into coaster enthusiast fandom this week. It's literally everywhere. So, well, speaking of Kings Island, we are going to be talking about a coaster from Kings Island today, but technically also Kings Dominion, because we're talking about Flight of Fear. Which is there's one at Kings Island and at Kings Dominion. So
why the one at Kings Island?
Why the one at Kings Island?
Why can't we talk about the one?
Oh, we're talking about both of them. We were just already talking about Kings Island, so that was my segue. So no, we're talking about both of them because they are identical. There's very, very small differences, so it makes sense to talk about them together. So they both opened in 1996 at $11 million apiece. Each of them is 2,705 feet long, 74 feet tall, with a top speed of 54 miles per hour. Now, this is kind of interesting. Average wait time for the Kings Island version is 49 minutes, which I can definitely see that because we went during a time where it was kind of busy.
Yeah.
Like, it wasn't super busy, but it was during coaster stock, so there was a good amount of people there. And I went there like first thing in the morning, and I waited 45 minutes. Like I went straight to Flight of Fear, and I still waited 45 minutes. So, and that wasn't even on the weekend. That was like I think that was Thursday or Friday that I did that. So yeah, the line for that ride gets really long.
Yeah, it does.
So Kings Dominion average wait time is 21 minutes. So that's over really less than half of that.
Yeah, it's really weird.
So, and I think in general, Kings Dominion just has less crowds than Kings Island does.
I can see that.
So I do kind of think that's part of what's going on there. So in the CoasterBot rankings, Kings Island's version ranks at 178, while Kings Dominion's is at 187, which is kind of interesting because I actually have them flipped.
Yeah.
That's
a big jump for being basically the same ride.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. Now, if I remember correctly, you actually didn't get to ride the Kings Island version.
No, I just rode Kings Dominion.
Just the Kings Dominion. Yeah, I can't even remember. I guess it was because we had Parker with us, huh?
Yeah.
And we were like, we were trying to do the parent swap thing, but I think basically we were like,
I was sick to that trip, so
that's true. And I think you were like, well, I went on the one at Kings Dominion, so and you're not like counting credits like I am, so it wasn't like a big deal to you to miss out on it.
True.
So, but I actually feel the opposite. I prefer Kings Dominions over Kings Islands, and the biggest difference for me, actually the only difference really that I remember, was Kings Dominion, when it went through the mid-course breaks, it slowed the train down, but then kept going. And Kings Island, when it went through the mid-course brake run, it came to a stop and then kept going. So the first half of the ride was identical, but the second half, Kings Dominion's was way better because it was going faster than Kings Island's was. So that's my main difference there. So it's kind of funny that it's opposite in the CoasterBot rankings, but that was my experience. Maybe it's different for other people.
Yeah.
They both rank below other indoor coasters such as Revenge of the Mummy at Universal Studios Florida, Space Mountain at Disneyland, and Rock and Roller Coaster at Hollywood Studios. They rank above indoor coasters such as Revenge of the Mummy at Universal Studios Hollywood, Runaway Mountain at Six Flags Over Texas, and Laugh Track at Hershey Park. At Kings Island, Flight of Fear ranks at number 7, behind Mystic Timbers, Orion, Diamondback, Banshee, the Beast, and the Bat. At Kings Dominion, it ranks at number 4. It's only behind Intimidator 305, Twisted Timbers, and Dominator. And I think that's just a matter of, Kings Island has more coasters than Kings Dominion does, so it kind of falls further down in the lineup because of that. So
yeah. All
right, let's see. Review of the name. I think it's a solid name. I like the alliteration. I think it's a little... The name has changed. It had we'll talk about it later, but it had a property connected to the name at one point that I think made it make more sense. And so now, like, if you hear Flight of Fear, I don't think people automatically assume that it's like a space-themed alias. Yeah, it doesn't have that connotation.
I didn't. Yeah, if you would have told me, like, hey, we're writing Flight of Fear, I would have not guessed that that's what it would be.
No. So I don't think the name is bad, but I do think it doesn't really describe what the theme of the ride is, which is fine. I mean, at this point, you can't change the name because it's had the name for so long. So I think it's fine as it is. So it's a solid logo. I mean, it's nothing crazy, but it works for what it is, and I don't have any problems with the logo.
I don't have any problems with the logo.
No sense talking about the paint scheme just because it's all indoors, so they just paint it black. The trains are fine. I mean, they're just a gray with like little green accents on them that you can kind of see around the bottom here in the back. But again, because it's an indoor coaster, I don't think they're as concerned with that.
Right.
As, if it was outdoors, then, people that are watching it can see. Right. Whereas when it's, mostly in the dark, you only really see it in the station, and that's it. So I don't think they care as much, which is fine.
Yeah,
so.
Makes sense. Save money elsewhere,
Yeah, for sure. Here's Kings Island's description. Get ready for an adrenaline rush unlike no other when you catapult from 0 to 54 miles per hour in just 4 seconds on this heart-pounding adventure in total darkness through 4 inversions.
Wow.
Yeah, that's a really short description. That's literally all that's on there. That's the whole thing. King's Dominion's a little bit more, but this first section here is exactly the same.
Oh.
Like the first top section here. The only other thing down here is that says, talks about, gives some bullet points. One of the most exciting accelerations of any roller coaster in the world. This also says the first linear induction motor LIM launched coaster. We'll talk about that more in a second, but
yeah, what is that?
LIM stands for linear induction motor. So it literally is like they just are saying the same thing twice. So it's fine.
Okay.
Park visitors and roller coaster enthusiasts alike rave about the smooth inversions. Kind of the opposite of that, actually. So, like, it's not bad, but I didn't get off Light if you're going like, ooh, that was silky smooth. Yeah. Maybe you did back in 96, but.
Maybe.
And I do like this, though. Early morning when the park opens is the best time to ride this popular attraction when the wait time is minimal. So I do appreciate that the park is like, this is the best time to go and ride this. So Holiday World does that with all of their roller coasters. Like, they tell you on the website, like, the best times to go and ride them.
That's
I'm like,
cool.
That's cool. I like that. So I like when parks do that to help out the guests. Customer reviews. So I pulled some from King's Dominion, some from Kings Island. So the overall, so I have to give this disclaimer now, but I pull the funny reviews or the ones that I find more interesting, or, this isn't a generalization of all the reviews. So these are, going to be 1-star, 2-star reviews. The overall rating is a 4.5 out of 5, which is actually a little low compared to some of the other ones we've been talking about lately.
These are just reviews that we find funny.
Yes, funny and or interesting and or crazy. So here's 1 star. This is an honest...
Maybe from now on we should say, this has a so-and-so rating.
Well, I always... Oh, well, like the... I've been doing that the past few episodes to kind of help.
Have you?
Yeah. Maybe she's not listening as much as I thought she was, guys.
Whatever. Me too.
Here's a 1-star review. This is an honest review. The ride is really tight and full of whiplashes. It's almost completely dark, which is a minus for me, but maybe a plus for you.
I love dark rides.
That's fair. I read on another review that it was like a car crash. I would say that's an accurate description.
What?
Okay. 2 stars. Disappointed because this ride queue and theme used to be so much nicer. They have turned off all the glowing colors around the aliens, stopped playing the tape that is supposed to introduce you to the site in the queue, and overall have trimmed off all the theme to bare bones for the ride to be just enough for functionality. Check old pictures out to see how this ride used to look. They've swapped the televisions out now to play Justin Bieber songs in the line rather than the newsreel. Come on now. I will say I did see this from a few people that the Cedar Fair parks have like a like a video that they play in the queues to like entertain people.
Right.
I think they call it like Fun TV or something like that. And I didn't notice this when I went on these rides, but maybe it was, and I just wasn't paying attention. But I've seen several people talk about that they're playing that in the queue, which they say takes away from the immersion, because they used to play like
a sci-fi.
Yeah, it was like a radio.
Cool.
It was like a radio station, like talking about like recent alien sightings and different things like that. And so, like, you can actually pull that up on YouTube. You can see the old stuff they used to play in the queue back in the 90s. So
yeah, that would have been cool.
So I don't know if that's a combination of the IP that used to be tied to the ride versus, I don't know. So, but I did see several people talk about that. 2 stars. My heart hurted in the ride, and I got a headache when I first rode the ride. And also, it is dark, and you don't know where you are going. And yeah.
And yeah.
And yeah. 1 star, more like Flight of Pain. Caused a severe neck jerk first one way and then unexpectedly the opposite direction. I reported it to park leadership, who were listening intently to another family's issue. She goes on to talk about they told her to go to first aid and that they were going to check out that particular seat. And then she basically says that they need to shut the ride down immediately. So I don't know, this... It just feels very dramatic. I don't know.
Yeah,
so pain and headaches that wasn't anything compared to Flight of Anguish. Shut it down.
Dear heavens.
Yeah. So I don't know. It kind of feels like a. I don't know. Like
a fluke.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like thousands and thousands of people ride this every day without problems. So it's like. I don't know. Yes, you need to...
They have disclaimers on those signs that say, hey, if you have, like, this and this and this problem, so maybe she had a problem before.
Maybe, yeah. And, like, yeah, they need to take care of her, and first aid, take care of her, sure, yeah, help her out. But, like, for, to shut down the ride because one person, got a headache on it, I think is,
a little bit much.
Yeah, for sure. Here's 4 stars. Jerky. Fun theme and cool, intense ride, but kind of painful. Make sure to keep your head against the headrest. I have a friend who suffered a concussion on this ride.
Oh, okay.
To be fair, they do tell you to put your head back against the seat. So if you don't do that, then perhaps you could run into some issues with that. So.
Get concussions.
And then here's our last review. This one will make sense later, but if you don't know what's going on, if you don't know what we're talking about, then this review just seems ridiculous. 3 stars. Pretty average spaghetti bowl. Which could also be a review for the for Olive Garden as well. So
okay.
Pretty average spaghetti bowl. So there you go.
Olive Garden that, man.
Oh, so we're never gonna get an Olive Garden sponsorship now, man. Well, there are our customer reviews for Flight of Fear at Kings Island and Kings Dominion. Let's talk about the history of Flight of Fear. So let's go back to 1995. All right, 1995. So, 1995, a new coaster manufacturer would be founded in Baltimore, Maryland. The manufacturer's name was Premier Rides, which I don't think we've actually talked much about them.
That doesn't sound familiar.
Yeah, I don't think, at the very least, I know we haven't done an episode about a coaster that Premier Rides has constructed. So, Premier was owned by Jim, I should have looked at how to pronounce his name. I think it's just Jim Say, or C. He'd spent 7 years as an engineering executive at Six Flags before he founded the company. Now, the one technology that Premier Rides was really focused on, which we mentioned earlier, is what is called the LIM launch. Now, up until this point, most roller coaster launches were either catapult or drop weight launches, in which a weight is a dropped weight. Yeah, it's a drop weight launch, makes sense. Dropped weight would wind a cable to pull the train, or a flywheel launch, in which a large flywheel used stored kinetic energy to pull a cable. Or there were also electric motor and spring tension launches, which weren't really that intense. They were more just to kind of push cars out of the station. But those were occasionally used too. So, but LIM launch would be a completely different and innovative design that required no cables whatsoever, which was nice. LIM stands for linear induction motor. And I'm not an engineer, so I'm going to try to explain this the best I can for you to understand and for the listeners to understand.
Maybe the listeners, but it's going to go right over my head.
So linear induction technology had been in use since like the 1960s, but they didn't really use it until the 80s when they started using it on magnetic levitation trains or maglev trains. Those aren't really that popular here, but they're used a lot in Europe and Japan. Now, so the way linear induction motors work is it uses sets of high-powered electromagnets that are secured to the track, and then there's a gap that's left in between the middle of each set of magnets. An alternating current is applied to the magnets to create a magnetic field, and then there's like a metal fin that's attached to the bottom of the train that passes through the gap in the magnets while the magnetic field creates a wave for the fin to ride and propels the train down the track. So simplified, the system, so this was from a newspaper article. This is what it said, quote, "The system essentially creates a traveling magnetic wave, and it's the magnetic wave that pushes the vehicles from a standstill to high speeds." So there you go. That makes sense? The best way is kind of like, if you think about it, if you had two magnets and like, you know, something magnetic in between them, you could pull the magnets forward and, you know, whatever that piece of metal you had in between or whatever would move with them, right?
Yeah.
This is essentially doing that same thing, but rather than the magnets actually moving, it's just turning them off and on in a way that the magnetic field moves and takes the train along with it. So it's more complicated than that. Obviously, I'm no engineer, but it was revolutionary, and it was capable of providing faster acceleration than other types of launch systems that were currently on the market. And fortunately for Premier Rides, a major player in the amusement industry immediately jumped at the chance to purchase this new coaster model.
Okay.
So in the summer of 1995, King's Dominion began teasing a new attraction when a crop circle was cut into a field nearby at the park. Oh, sorry, I have these pictures. So this is... I don't know if this would have made it any easier for you to understand.
I still have no idea.
So this is one magnet here, though. This is another magnet here. And then this metal fin goes right in between the magnets, and it kind of pushes it. So here's the crop circle that was at King's Dominion. Crop circle featured a UFO, an alien, and the letter F written in binary code. I actually read that the maintenance team even singed the grass with torches to make it look like an alien spaceship had just touched down there.
That's a little crazy.
Yeah. I actually am curious how many people even would have noticed that detail, because this wasn't like at the park. It was like close by, but you could see it. You could see it like on the news station stuff. I don't know, maybe it did, maybe it was noticeable. I don't know, but so, just a few weeks later, in August of 1995, Paramount Parks announced that Kings Island and Kings Dominion would be opening two identical coasters in 1996. So here's the Kings Island announcement ceremony. So Kings Dominion did the crop circle. That was kind of how they teased it. At Kings Island, they had this big ceremony, and like everyone came, and this guy got up front. That was one of the people that worked at the park. And he said, basically, like, we had something like land in Kings Island last night. And we brought in I think it's the Bureau of Paranormal Activity. I can't remember the name of the company that, comes in. And so then they brought all the media over, and there's this big crater over here. And they had, like, this big capsule that was in the middle of the crater. And there's, like, guys, like, scanning it, like, as if there was, like, a team there, like, investigating whatever it was. And then they brought it up here to, up where all the media sat back down. And then they opened it, and there was that same design from the crop circle at King's Dominion. Anyway, super corny, like this whole, like, story behind it.
Most
like,
most things in the 90s were. So.
But it's kind of cool that, like, this is the construction site. And they basically just turned the construction site into a crater. That was where this space, this unidentified object landed and, smashed this crater at Kings Island. And then this guy was like the leader of the team that was there, and he basically asked the park employees, like, we are asking your permission to have a permanent base set up here to investigate these findings. And the Kings Island was basically like permission granted. Like, so that was the whole thing. It was like, the Bureau was setting up their permanent base here to investigate the paranormal activity or the, unidentified flying objects in the area. So there you go. So both of the coasters would be named the Outer Limits Flight of Fear. Coasters would be themed to the 1960s TV show, The Outer Limits, which I guess I'm not super familiar, but from what I gather is it was very similar to the Twilight Zone, kind of that same vibe of like there's a narrator just telling one-off stories.
I can see that.
But it was more focused on sci-fi rather than on like paranormal, and so interesting.
Okay.
But the show had just been rebooted in 1995, hence Paramount's use of the roller coasters for marketing purposes. Right? Makes sense. So the coasters would be record-breaking in several ways. First, they would be the first LIM-launched coasters, as we just talked about.
Right. They
would be the first indoor coasters with inversions in the U.S., and the first launched indoor coasters in the U.S.
Oh,
now, it's fascinating. I thought they were the first indoor coaster with inversions and the first launched indoor coasters in the world.
Yeah.
But as I did more research, you want to know what the first indoor launched coaster with inversions was?
What?
Space Mountain at Disneyland Paris.
What?
That's the first indoor launched coaster and the first indoor coaster with inversions. It just had opened in 1995, so just
Paris
a year before
opened
this.
First?
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know Paris opened first.
Well, no, not the Disneyland Space. Like, that Space Mountain didn't open first.
Oh, that's right, because
it's the only Space Mountain that has inversions and a launch. It's totally different than the other ones. So there you go. There's your fun fact for the day.
There's my Disney fact for the day.
Yeah. Okay. We did talk about Disney.
Hey,
you're welcome.
Thanks, babe.
Each coaster would feature a 0 to 54 mile per hour launch, 4 inversions, and would be built inside a 1-acre building where riders would experience total darkness except for a few lighting effects. So here are some of the, let's see. So this is like a drawing of the station. Here's an artist's rendition of kind of the whole attraction. And then this is the logo that went along with the announcement. So early reports were estimating a $7 million cost, but Paramount later confirmed that the cost would be significantly higher than that. I guess Premier Rides first was going to do this without it was just going to be either a cable lift coaster or it was going to be like a regular launch coaster with a cable like some of the other ones. But then they developed this LIM launch that eventually is what they decided to go with. But that technology added a lot of money to the project, obviously. Each coaster would also boast an astounding capacity of 2,000 riders per hour, which we'll get to that later. That's a lot, and I've heard conflicting stories on whether that's actually possible or not.
Okay.
Anyway, we'll talk about that later. At Kings Island, the new coaster would be built behind the racer. Guests would follow a new path that would be directly underneath the racer support structure to get to the new attraction. At Kings Dominion, the coaster would be built on the far east side of the park past Anaconda and Avalanche, and right next to what would eventually become Volcano the Blast coaster.
Got it.
But at that time, it was still the Lost World, I think is still what it was at that time. The building that the coasters would be built in featured 3 main sections, which you can kind of see in this rendition here, but it's basically a queue building, a ride building, and then there's a big launch tunnel that connects the 2 main buildings together.
Yeah.
So, which is kind of similar to how a lot of indoor coasters nowadays do it. Right. I mean, even if you look at Guardians of the Galaxy Cosmic Rewind, that's basically the same way that they do that one. So it's, it's not uncommon. This is oh wait, we've got some construction pictures here. So there you go. There's some. You can see the building and the coaster were kind of built at the same time because you can see the building's not done, but the coaster is under, the track is being laid down here in the middle. So I'm not exactly sure which was finished first. Seems like it'd be easier to finish the track before you enclose the building, like, because then you're in the dark. So, anyway, you can see, because, like, this one here, this looks like the roof still hasn't been put on the building, but it's still pretty, like, it seems like the track's almost completed in this. So, anyway, I couldn't find confirmation one way or the other.
Yeah.
An article I read, this was a very weird stat, and I don't even know why they felt the need to put it in there, but an article I read stated that the acceleration of the coaster was only matched by one high-performance sports car in the world at the time, which...
That's a weird stat.
Well, it's a weird stat, but it's also completely false, because before I was really into coasters,
you were into cars.
Yeah, I was really into, like, and still kind of am, but not as much as coasters, really into, like, high-end sports cars. And so, like, I know, like, when I read that stat, I'm like, there's no way that's true. And so I looked it up, and sure enough, it's slower than the McLaren F1, the Jaguar XJ220, the Bugatti EB110, the Porsche 911 Turbo, the Ferrari F50, and others. So, for those of you that like cars, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Most of you probably just like...
That's me.
You're just like, reading a
just
bunch
like
of gibberish.
Too. Just like that.
Just like that.
Yeah.
Point is, I don't know where they got that stat from, because it's not even close to true.
Okay.
Anyway. November of 1995, so while construction's going on, Premier Rides won the Brass Ring Award for the best new product in the amusement industry at the 1995 IAAPA Expo, which is crazy because the coasters hadn't even opened yet.
Yeah.
Like, that's how innovative this technology was. Like, people were basically like, even if this doesn't work, the idea is good enough that we're going to give you this award. That is crazy.
Yeah,
can you imagine giving a Nobel Prize for a theoretical idea?
Yeah.
Or like giving an Oscar for a movie that hasn't released yet? Like, that just that doesn't make sense to me. But that's essentially what happened. So, and clearly it worked out. Like, clearly they figured it out. But it's just funny to me. Like, this is before it was even tested. Like, it had been tested on a small scale at their facility, but
like
it had been not on a full blown scale yet. Like, the rides were still under construction.
Yeah, none of the general public were there even. Like,
no. So yeah, because this is 6 months before the rides opened that they received this award. So that's pretty crazy. So. This is a model from the IAAPA Expo, so you can kind of see the general idea of how the ride is laid out, this is just a crazy layout for a roller coaster, by the way. Yeah. It is a mess of track, which is just fascinating to me. So
it does look like a bowl of spaghetti.
It's an accurate description, isn't it? So
it's like a bowl
for those
of
you who don't know, when we're talking spaghetti bowl, essentially what that means is that all the track just winds around itself, but it's like all almost tied together in one big knot. And so it does kind of look like just a big bowl of spaghetti. And the idea is that the track kind of winds around towards the bottom and then, exits out somewhere around the bottom of the building. So when you hear spaghetti bowl, that is used in other coasters of a similar style as, spaghetti bowl roller coasters is kind of a thing that's, used throughout the industry.
It's a thing.
Yes.
It's just a thing.
It's a thing. So if you if you look up Flight of Fear, look up the layout for I guess that's another thing I'll mention. You can see some of these pictures I'm showing Haley if you go to our social media, either on the app formerly known as Twitter or over on Instagram.
Just need to start calling it what it is.
I refuse.
Okay.
But if you go on there, you can see some of these pictures. If you want to see what the layout for Flight of Fear looks like, you'll kind of get what we're talking about here. So
you refuse.
I refuse to call it X. All right, this is a bit of a tangent here. It's not super related to the story. It's not a super long tangent though.
Is it your tangent or is it someone else's tangent?
I mean, it does have to do with the story, kind of. It'll make sense.
Okay.
So, in January of 1996, Paramount presented their progress on the coasters at a roller coaster conference in Chicago. Now, among the attendees for the presentation were engineers from the United States Navy. Now, the reason for that is that the LIM technology that had been developed by Premier Rides was something that the Navy kind of took an interest in. So they were actually looking at the system as a safer and more efficient way to launch fighter jets from aircraft carriers.
Interesting.
And so they showed up and they kind of learned more about it, and they eventually began developing their own LIM technology. And in 2013, they would launch the USS Gerald R. which was the very first aircraft carrier to use the Navy's, I think it's EMALS is how they say it. It's Electromagnetic Aircraft Launch System. And it is powered by LIM, just like Flight of Fear is.
Interesting.
So, and to this day, the USS Gerald R. is the largest aircraft carrier in the U.S. naval fleet and is the largest warship ever constructed.
That's cool.
So there you go. And it all, the technology used on the ship started from looking at this technology from this roller coaster we're talking about.
Yeah,
so,
buddy.
Weird tangent, very small tangent, but it was something I noticed. I saw multiple reports about this too. So
that's cool.
Yeah, I
like that.
I was like, how about that? So, you ready to hear another crazy story?
Yes.
During construction in 1996, so I think February 1996, a man fell 110 feet from the Kings Island Flight of Fear building, but survived.
What? How did he fall?
So, well, he was one of the construction workers. Like, he was working on the building, and I don't know if he wasn't harnessed properly or what it was, but
yeah.
So 20-year-old John Reeves said he didn't even remember the fall because it happened so fast. He broke both heels, his left leg, and crushed his right foot.
Oh my gosh.
But doctors expected him to make a full recovery and said they had never heard of someone surviving an 11-story fall.
Ugh.
That is crazy. Like, when I don't know if I've ever told you this story, but when I was in Scouts when I was younger, we went to scout camp when I was like 16 or 17.
Yeah.
And there was a boy there that fell from the climbing wall. And that wall was like, I don't know, maybe 35, 40 feet.
Yeah.
And I watched it happen, and it was just sickening because you're just like, I don't know, that boy's going to survive. Fortunately, he did. All he did was break a leg, and, he actually showed up back at camp later that week, and everyone gave him like a big standing ovation. It was pretty cool. But I'm just imagining that, but from 11 stories, like, that's crazy. So, anyway.
No thanks. I'd rather not watch something like that happen.
But shout out to John, because he mentions his band in this article. He's a part of the band Death Warmed Over, which is a metal band in Cincinnati. And I found them on Facebook, and he's still playing rhythm guitar for Death Warmed Over to this day.
So funny.
So, and you can go listen to them on Spotify if you feel so inclined.
Should tag them.
There you go.
Tag them in it.
So, anyway, that's a crazy story. So construction was obviously fairly crazy. The LIM launch technology wasn't without its problems either. So the clearance between the fins and the magnets is very tight. I guess I saw that somewhere that it's like 10 millimeters. So it's like tiny, tiny. And so the track, extra attention has to be paid attention to the limbs and the magnets and the wear of the wheels, because if the wheels, wear down a couple millimeters, then, that could cause problems.
Right.
So it's very, extra special attention has to be paid taken care of for, all these little pieces that could go wrong. And I guess at some point during a test in March 1996, that one of the fins caught the side of one of the motors and completely ripped it off the train. So these are the kinds of things that they had to, fine tune and make sure were resolved before opening day. So, but despite the difficulties, on April 11th, 1996, Premier Rides and King's Dominion performed the first successful LIM coaster launch. After a few this is crazy. After a few successful launches, 2 maintenance managers were the first to test the ride. When they came back to the station, one of them was missing their glasses and immediately went to lie down after exiting the train. So everyone's kind of like, what happened? it was discovered that the train was launching way faster than it was supposed to.
What?
Like, it's supposed to go 54 miles per hour. It was going like 70 when they wrote it.
Oh, dear.
So instead of the 4 Gs they were supposed to be experiencing during the first inversion, they went through 6.
Oh my gosh. That's fast.
Nuts. From that point, testing just became a nightmare because they didn't want to launch it too fast, but if you launch it too slow, then it gets stuck.
Right.
And so they spent months just trying to fine tune this. And another problem that they started to run into was it was using more electricity than they originally anticipated. So early estimates from Premier suggested that each launch would require 1.5 megawatts of electricity, that's a huge number, first of all. But once the test began, it was discovered that each launch was using roughly twice that much. It was using like 3 megawatts of electricity per launch. Now, I didn't know exactly what that looked like. Right. So you want to hear some stats to give you a general idea of how much electricity that is?
Okay.
This is crazy. You ready for this?
Yes.
One launch could power 30,000 light bulbs for an hour.
What?
The average U.S. household uses 10.6 megawatts a year. This coaster is going through that every 4 launches.
Dang.
I did some quick math. 3 megawatts could power all the households in our town for 45 minutes.
That's pretty crazy.
And then this is a very strange stat that I found on an energy website that I have no idea how they calculated this or why they even did so. But I'm going to throw it out there because it was on the website and I thought it was funny. 3 megawatts could toast 267,000 slices of bread.
Oh, it's a lot of grilled cheese.
You remember... So this is really funny because you remember... This is a long time ago. Back in episode 8, we talked about the racer catching fire. Like, the train caught fire on the way to being installed, and they have no idea why. And we made a joke about Burnt Toast, the ride. You remember that?
Yeah.
How is it that we have started talking about toast again for another Kings Island ride? I don't...
Toast is good.
But why?
I don't
Why
know.
Kings Island again? I don't understand.
They just like toast. Maybe they need to have a toast restaurant.
So, just toast?
Just toast. You can
just
have like different toppings, but toast.
Isn't that just, I guess, open-faced sandwiches?
Yeah.
There you go. Anyway, that is a huge amount of energy we're talking about.
I'm digging it. I like this.
3 megawatts per launch. That's insane. So it was so bad that it would cause voltage sags to neighboring utility customers. So imagine, like, you're just sitting in your house and they launch the coaster and all of a sudden your lights just go...
Oh my gosh. I would hate that. I would hate that so much.
So, obviously, the electric company and the city of Mason were like, no, we're not doing this. So, they had to bring in Schneider Electric to develop a solid-state capacitor bank that would reduce the electric load on neighboring utilities so that it wouldn't cause voltage sags or brownouts in the area. Like, that's crazy.
Yep.
I don't think it was as much of an issue for Kings Dominion because they're in a more rural area.
Yeah.
But when they installed Volcano a couple years later in 1998, that was now 2 launch coasters that were right next to each other. And the city of Doswell basically told them, like, it's fine if they launch separately, but if ever they launch together, that would cause a brownout in the city. So they basically made them do the same thing that Kings Island had to do. So
in the city.
Yeah,
oh my goodness.
that's so much electricity we're talking about.
Please don't get shocked.
Yeah, this is pretty nuts. So,
I would die.
So all these energy issues that they're dealing with did cause the coasters to be delayed from their April opening date to June while they worked out the power issues with local power companies and stuff like that.
But that's not too bad.
It's not terrible, and it does happen. So, all right, you ready for a commercial?
Yes.
These are always fun.
They are fun. I like commercials.
Remember years ago when you were afraid, frightened, terrified of the dark? Welcome back. Prepare yourself for the Outer Limits Flight of Fear, the scariest, darkest, most twisted roller coaster ever. Face your fears, only at Paramount's Kings Island.
I love that. My favorite part of that is that it says it's only at Paramount's Kings Island.
It's not.
And it's literally at another park.
Yeah.
The exact same ride.
Something about that, but I'm glad you mentioned it because I'm like,
That is really funny to me.
Say again?
Well, after 10 months of construction and development, the Outer Limits Flight of Fear would open at Kings Island and Kings Dominion on June 18th, 1996, and continue to operate to this day. So here's some pictures. These aren't from opening day, but they're from early on in the ride's life cycle. I think these are 99 and 2000, so fairly early on. You can see they both have the same exact sign. So, but, you know, this one you walked under the racer here so these are both Kings Island over here on the left. And then here's Kings Dominion over here on the right. So, ride experience is as follows. While the train is loading and waiting to be dispatched, a sound effect imitating the warm-up of a jet engine can be heard. After boarding, riders wait with anticipation before being launched from the station, accelerating from 0 to 54 miles per hour in 4 seconds. Down a 220-foot launch tunnel. The ride emerges into a spaghetti bowl of track inside of the 110-foot tall ride building. Following the launch, the train immediately enters a Cobra roll, which contains 2 of the ride's 4 inversions. The ride layout continues with a sidewinder and multiple turns. After passing through the mid-course brake run, riders spiral downward to the left, continuing to maneuver through the twisted ride structure. The train picks up speed as riders dive toward the floor of the building, finally passing through the final inversion, a corkscrew, before arriving at the final brake run.
Is this your description?
Some of these are mine, some I take from other sources.
Spaghetti bowl like your resource, or is that something that you found?
Well, spaghetti bowl is a term that is used in the industry for these types of coasters. So,
okay, yeah.
So the queue is very heavily themed as well. Didn't talk about that in the actual ride description, but there's a lot of most of the queue is inside the building, and there's a lot of different decorations. And so the building is designed to look like an Area 51 inspired military hangar. The outside is marked with the number 18. Riders enter through a press area located under an awning to the side of the building. Various TVs and radios would play broadcaster discussing UFO sightings and other alien encounters. At one point, the queue reveals a full-sized UFO. So here's a picture of the UFO from the line.
I really like that.
Yeah, it looks really nice too. So, yep, guests will actually pass through the UFO en route to the station, kind of giving off the illusion that you go inside the spaceship, and then the ride is like you're riding the flying saucer, right?
Right.
So, the UFO appears to be complete, but is actually half of a UO lined up against a mirror on the back wall.
I think we talked about this.
Yeah, I think you and I have talked about that. I don't know if we talked about it on the show, but I think you and I have talked about that before.
I think, you and I talked about it when we were at the park.
Yeah, so in the dimly lit queue building, it's really hard to tell. In fact,
I couldn't tell.
I didn't know when we were at Kings Dominion. I didn't know. I found that out later when we went to Kings Island. So I was like, oh, what do you know? So
that's cool.
Yeah, it's very well done. So let's see. Here's a picture of kind of the inside of the building, cool. Just with the lights on. You can kind of see all the track.
I feel like you would love something like that to go and take pictures inside.
They do tours of the inside of Flight of Fear, and actually we're going to watch a video here in a second of somebody took a video when they went on one of these tours, because yeah, it's pretty cool.
Do they do that for an ACE event? Or?
They would do it for coaster stock, I bet, is when they do stuff like that. So yeah, cool stuff. So here's the video. Again, you listening to the podcast won't be able to see this, so you have to go and look this up on our socials if you want to watch this. But I'm actually going to mute this because the sound of it isn't necessarily that important, but you get the the general idea.
From inside the bowl.
From inside the bowl is what it says. So.
Oh, and they even get to watch it run. That's cool.
Isn't that pretty sweet?
That is cool.
Yeah, because I love that, because that just shows like that they're catering to the enthusiasts. Because like they don't have to run the coaster while people are inside. That's not a requirement or anything like that. But they know that people would love to see that, they just put in the extra effort to make that happen.
Really cool.
Yeah. So this is Kings Island's version in the video. And you can see once it goes to that mid-course and stops completely, like you can see this section, it just kind of meanders around.
Yeah.
Now, granted, the train is empty, so it runs a little slower when there's not people in it, but still, you get it's just very kind of slow up until it gets to the bottom and goes through this it flies through this corkscrew at the end of the ride. So pretty cool. This is a pretty cool. We've talked about park lore before. I think they actually, when we did Cosmic Rewind earlier this year, I think they had done I pulled up some illustrations that they had done of how Cosmic Rewind looked before, and like what it used to look like when it was Ellen's Energy Adventure, and then what it looked like after they did the conversion. So here's another illustration they did of Flight of Fear. So you can see here, so this is the queue building here. You can see how the saucer is just, that half with the mirror lined up. And then when you walk through, that actually takes you right into kind of this second half of the building where you load into the station here. And then you can see the brake run to the launch track and this tunnel with the spaghetti bowl and the big section of track over here. And then there is a separate unload station. That's important to achieve the 2,000 riders per hour, because the way it's situated, so you have a load station, unload station, brake run, and then the mid-course brake that's during the actual ride. Those together allow them to run 4 trains at a time if they really wanted to. So they could crank out trains on this ride. But
what's their wait time? I mean, they should.
They really should, but they never will. I saw some reports that early on they did, but and I talked to a few ride operators just because I'm in a group on Facebook with some
cool.
people from King's Dominion specifically, but talked to a few ride operators, and I saw one ride operator said it is possible if they're running all 4 trains, but they never do. And then someone else was saying that nowadays it's only running like 600 to 700 because they only run 2 trains. So I'm like, yeesh, that's terrible. So that would explain why the wait times are so long.
Dumb.
So, but according to one of the ride operators I talked to, he said Flight of Fear at King's Dominion at one point had an 8-hour wait during the opening year. I'm like, that's insane. Would you?
No. No.
Would you ever, for any ride, wait 8 hours?
Wait 8 hours for anything.
I don't.
Even if it would be like meeting Ed Sheeran or like, no, not worth it.
8 hours.
8 hours. Crazy. What would you do like if you had to like use the restroom like and you're by yourself? Like, I'm sorry.
So that's interesting. This is totally not totally unrelated, but. So this past week, Primordial finally opened at Lagoon, that new coaster that they've been building.
Yeah.
And I saw that in the queue, they're expecting the lines for Primordial to be so long. They have a sign in the queue that says if you need to use the restroom, to let a ride attendant know so that they can hold your spot for you while you go to the bathroom and then come back.
Way.
I was like, I've never seen that before. That's crazy.
Pretty crazy.
That's something else.
That's too much.
I have no idea if that'll actually get used or not, but they did have a sign.
That's too much.
So.
Oh my gosh.
Anyway, so back to Flight of Fear. The coasters were both fantastic additions to both parks, and they never really received a lot of praise among the enthusiast community, but they were high capacity, they were crowd pleasers. So, and especially on hot days in the summer, you could get out of the sun just, you could get out of the sun just while waiting in line, even not just on the ride, but even waiting in line, which is a big selling point for a lot of people. So, after the first year of operations, sections of the coaster were experiencing premature fatigue. So they did come back in and reinforce over the next several years. They also added a staircase that leads from the mid-course break back down to ground level, which is very good they did that, because in 1998 there was a couple that got married in the station of the King's Dominion version of the ride. Which how many coasters have we talked about that people get married on? But this is probably the 4th or 5th one we've talked about, which is...
I just don't see the appeal, but...
maybe they were both ride operators for Flight of Fear. That's how they met. I don't know.
I guess so.
So anyway, the couple got married on the station, and then the wedding party got on the train. And after it launched, it got stuck during the first half of the ride.
Oh my gosh.
But fortunately, they had put that staircase in, so the wedding party was able to evacuate instead of having to wait for a crane to come in and pull the train.
Oh my word.
Yeah, so that was good.
I couldn't imagine being stuck and just waiting for a crane to come get me out.
I know, right? So, in the few years that followed, Flight of Fear would have a pretty big impact on the coaster industry from a couple perspectives. So, first of all, Six Flags would hire Premier Rides to build a trio of launch coasters for the 1998 season. 2 of them would be Mr. Freeze Reverse Blast, which is this one here on the left. This one is at Six Flags St. Louis and Six Flags Over Texas. Except the only difference is the Over Texas version now launches forward and then backward, whereas the St. Louis one still goes backwards and then forwards. So now they're different, but still the same ride.
Okay.
Then the other one was Batman and Robin the Chiller, which was a dueling coaster at Six Flags Great Adventure. Is no longer there. That's another fascinating story for another day. So there's a whole story, whole saga to do with that ride. But
oh dear.
Premier Rides would also build a few outdoor clones of Flight of Fear. Some of these were built overseas, but there's actually 2 that were built stateside. So there's Joker's Jinx, which was built at Six Flags America, and then there's Poltergeist, which was built at Six Flags Fiesta Texas. So both of these are identical to Flight of Fear. Same layout, same trains, outside. Everything. They're just outside.
Interesting.
So it's kind of interesting. So you can, if you don't, if you're out down in the south and can't get up to ride Flight of Fear at, Kings Island or Kings Dominion, you can go to Six Flags Fiesta Texas and ride the same thing just outside.
Yep. You're afraid of the dark? Go ride this.
Yeah, there you go. These both say that they launch at 60 miles per hour instead of 54, but I've heard so many people say that they don't notice a difference between this.
Someone needs to time it.
Yeah, so it's kind of interesting that Six Flags is claiming that these ones are faster than the original Flight of Fear, but a lot of people are saying it doesn't feel different at all. So kind of weird. The other thing that Flight of Fear was a big deal for a lot of parks because it featured theming that you typically only saw at like a Disney or Universal.
Right.
Like you may have a theme for your ride, but having an actual queue with like a story.
I mentioned this too when we were there.
Oh, it's easily the best themed attraction at both parks.
Right.
Mystic Timbers, you could make an argument for at Kings Island.
Right.
But easily at Kings Dominion, it's the one with the most theming elements. So, Twisted Timbers is okay too. There's at least a story to go along with Twisted Timbers, but there's not like a lot of... Like the queue is still like kind of outside. There's not like... Anyway, there's still some theming for Twisted Timbers, just not as much as for Flight of Fear. That being said, it wasn't long before Disney and Universal took note, because in 1999, Disney would open Rock and Roller Coaster at then MGM Studios, nowadays Hollywood Studios.
Have they talked any more about retheming this ride?
I mean, there's always talks about retheming it, but they just reopened it from a refurb like 3 or 4 months ago, and they didn't do a thing to it. So I have no idea.
We'll see.
We'll do a Rock and Roller Coaster episode at some point, because the one overseas, they did retheme, which is kind of interesting. So,
didn't they do an Iron Man theme?
Yeah, that's the new one over in Paris is an Iron Man theme now. So, it's never been confirmed, but it's pretty hard to deny that Rock and Roller Coaster was not directly inspired by Flight of Fear. I mean, so here's Flight of Fear up here. This is the park lore's illustration of Flight of Fear. Here's Rock and Roller Coaster down here. They're like
they're
almost identical. Because I put it side by side here. They both feature LIM launches at almost the same speed. Both feature spaghetti bowl layouts with multiple inversions, both completely in the dark except for a few special effects, separate load and unload stations, a queue building, a ride building, and a launch tunnel to connect the two. Like, it's just, like, very interesting. So I don't know if Disney saw this and said, we're going to copy that, or if Vekoma saw it and said, we're going to copy that and then sell it to Disney. But it's just fascinating that, quite literally, like, a lot of people I've seen, like, in some of the reviews for Flight of Fear. I didn't read any of the reviews I'm talking about, but some reviews I saw, like, oh, this is kind of like a knockoff Rock and Roller Coaster, which is funny because it's actually the other way around. Flight of Fear came first, and then Rock and Roller Coaster opened 3 years later. So, kind of interesting. The obvious major difference is the theme is music instead of space, and onboard audio.
Well, and it's not completely dark, Rock and Roller Coaster.
It's not completely dark, but Flight of Fear isn't completely dark either. So there's definitely more theming on the ride for Rock and Roller Coaster, because it's not just lights, it's like signs and neon and different things like that. So I would say Rock and Roller Coaster is definitely better, and I think coaster enthusiasts generally agree with that. But it is just funny that it was totally inspired by Flight of Fear. Universal would also get in on the action when they opened Revenge of the Mummy in 2004. This one's fairly different, though. It's much less similar. The ride is a large-scale indoor launch coaster using LIM launch technology, but the ride experience is very different. It features some dark ride elements, has multiple launches backward and forward, but it's only a top speed of 40 miles per hour, so it's more family friendly.
I don't think I rode Revenge of the Mummy when I was there.
So this is a weird thing, because we went to Universal before I was really an enthusiast, right? And looking back, I'm like, why did we not ride Revenge of the Mummy? It must have been closed, because I don't know why we wouldn't have gone on it unless it was closed for refurb. Because otherwise, we totally would have gone on it. I didn't ride
a lot of the rides that trip because I got so sick.
Yeah, so maybe you wouldn't have done this one, but I didn't either. Like, none of us did. I don't know why. So, must have been closed.
Had to have been.
After Revenge of the Mummy opened in 2004, the Golden Ticket Awards introduced a temporary new category for Best Indoor Roller Coaster. Rock and Roller Coaster would win, followed by Space Mountain and Magic Kingdom. Exterminator at Kennywood finished third, which is hilarious.
That's really funny.
And Flight of Fear would finish fourth. Revenge of the Mummy finished fifth. In 2001, Paramount decided to discontinue their licensing deal with the Outer Limits property, so both coasters were renamed to simply Flight of Fear, which is what they're still called to this day. So here are the new signs that they installed outside of both the attractions after that happened. So
but different.
They are similar, but they're definitely different, which is kind of interesting. Like, they use the same font, but definitely different. Like, this one, different colors. Yeah, it's kind of interesting.
Red poles are different.
Yeah. So, I don't know. Interesting. That same year, Paramount actually made the decision to upgrade the coasters with new restraints, which kudos to Paramount, by the way, for that. And I think Premier Rides actually was the one that kind of spearheaded it. And Premier Rides, I think, won an excellence award from the Golden Ticket Awards for being willing to go in and refurb all their old coasters. So that was pretty cool. So basically, they came in and took away the old over-the-shoulder restraints and replaced them with lap bars, which
I appreciate it.
I do too, and that is the one thing I will say Flight of Fear does way better than Rock and Roller Coaster. Rock and Roller Coaster still deals with the over-the-shoulder restraints, and Flight of Fear has only the lap bars now, which makes it much more comfortable from a headbanging perspective. So, I saw from some sources that the train sizes were decreased from 6 cars down to 5, but a lot of people I talked to said that was never the case. I'm not sure why I saw reports about that.
Weird. Anyway,
so it's very strange. During this time, rumor has it that Paramount was also considering a couple different refurbs for the ride. They proposed a retheme to Soundwave's TV, which would have essentially made it a knockoff Rock and Roller Coaster. I'm glad they didn't do that, because that would have been... if they had themed it to music, then it really would have been a knockoff Rock and Roller Coaster at that point, so... I guess King's Dominions was apparently in discussion to be relocated to one of the other Paramount parks. So I think Canada's Wonderland or Carowinds, I'm not sure which one, but In 2006, when Cedar Fair purchased the Paramount Parks, Cedar Fair basically just said, yeah, let's just leave it there. So that's eventually what happened. They just decided to leave both of them as they were. 2007, Kings Island would add Firehawk next to Flight of Fear, which is this red coaster right here.
It's not even there anymore. No,
it's not there anymore. So we'll get to that in a few minutes. But the whole area of the park would be renamed to X Base. So here's the sign for the new, X Base with Flight of Fear and Firehawk. It's themed to space and the paranormal. So X Base, tactical and experimental stratospheric technologies. I don't know. It's kind of a government Area 51 type of deal, I guess. So, meanwhile, over at King's Dominion, Flight of Fear finds itself in a kind of a difficult position theme-wise. And you and I have talked about this before.
Their theming is...
I mean, it's tricky because, like, on the one hand, it's right next to, like, this whole jungle area.
Yeah.
But then you go past Flight of Fear, and then, there's the whole NASCAR-themed Intimidator 305 area on the other side. So
it's just a weird spot.
Yeah, it's definitely tricky. It doesn't, definitely doesn't fit in with the rides that are around it. So, and I'm not exactly sure what to do about that. So, kind of just is what it is at this point. So, speaking of Intimidator 305, during the 2009 season, Flight of Fear would operate entirely in the dark because electricity from the ride was rerouted for the construction of Intimidator 305. So, nowadays it's very difficult to get a ride in pure darkness because there's like spotlights with like different colors that are underneath. It would be cool to
do it completely dark.
So, according to some sources, the King's Dominion version's lights shut off automatically at 10:26 p.m. I don't know why that's what they picked, but so if you can manage to be one of the last in a very long line on a really late night, maybe. But
I'll have to try it one day.
Yeah. And then from what I understand, at Kings Island, the very last ride of the night, they turn the lights on, like all the lights on, so that you can ride it with the lights on.
That'd be crazy.
So
that'd also be crazy. Like two different. I feel like that'd be two different ride experiences.
Yeah, lights on or everything off. Sorry. Yeah, that'd be definitely very interesting.
Yeah.
Back over at Kings Island, Flight of Fear would be included in the park's Winterfest lineup starting in 2018. The ride is renamed Flight of Cheer during the event.
Okay.
There you go. So they actually put this little sign over the top of it there.
It's funny.
Yeah, but this poster here with like the alien sitting on Santa's lap. It's really funny.
That's so cheesy.
And they have like little Christmas trees and wreaths up in the station.
I will say that.
It's pretty fun. So. In 2020, Firehawk was removed in favor of Orion, which is what stands there nowadays. So here's kind of a before and after of what that looked like.
Well, I could see why. Orion's like superior. So.
Oh, easily. Orion is way better. So Orion and Flight of Fear are now part of a new themed area named Area 72, which is a play on the famous Area 51 and the park's opening year of 1972. So, here's the new signage for Area 72. So that's what it looked like when we were there, obviously.
Right.
And then the outside of the building for Flight of Fear received some additional theming elements as part of this new expansion. So here's what it looked like prior to the new expansion. Nowadays, there's like this van out front. And it's like, there's like this hole in the ground here that's been fenced off. And actually they added like some singe marks to the building. You see that?
That's
there?
Cool.
Yeah, so...
I can get behind that.
Yeah, and then they added like I think there's a new Flight of Fear sign that they put over there because that's not there in this picture here. So
even like they covered that building completely.
Yeah, so they did some little... And I think what they're trying to do, they're trying to tie the two rides together in kind of the same theme, which makes sense since they're next to each other in that little themed area. So
yeah.
And that is pretty much the history of these two roller coasters. The only other thing I'll throw in here for a fun fact is the employees have set up a basketball court inside of
What's that remind
the
you
Kings
of?
Island. What?
There's another coaster that has a basketball court in it.
Well, I've heard that Matterhorn at Disneyland has a basketball hoop. Like, it's not a full, like, court inside, but it has a basketball hoop.
Yeah.
Is that the one you're thinking
Yeah.
of? Yeah. So, yeah. They get from what I understand, they had a little more room here at Kings Island, so they actually drew out a 3-point line on the ground and everything.
That's funny.
So there you go. And that is the history of Flight of Fear at Kings Island and Kings Dominion. So it's not like a huge, neither of them are like huge on, like it's not super high on coaster enthusiast lists, but they had a really big impact as far as the coasters that would come later, just because.
Even like in history itself with the whole Navy and
with just the
technology.
with LIM technology becoming a big thing.
I like
it's not used a lot anymore, but magnet launches are still a big thing. They're more. We could get into all the complete technical terms of how everything works and all the engineering, but LIM launches aren't used a whole lot anymore, but magnets have become like the number one thing that are used in launches and roller coasters nowadays. So later on, hydraulic launches would become a really big thing in the early 2000s. So that's what's used on things like powder keg. Powder keg's air compressed, but it's kind of the same idea. But it's also used on like Storm Runner and things like that. Use hydraulic launches, but hydraulic launches have kind of fallen out of style, and magnets are kind of back in. So like Top Thrill Dragster, that that's now being converted into Top Thrill 2. That used to be a hydraulic launch. The new version of it is actually going to be an LSM magnet launch. So that's kind of the way of the future. So. And Flight of Fear kind of kickstarted that in the industry, and also brought Rock and Roller Coaster and other big indoor coasters. Even Cosmic Rewind to us, in a sense, is kind of a successor of Flight of Fear many years later in a way. So well, thank you for tuning in to this episode of the podcast. If you like that episode, be sure to go and leave us a 5-star rating. You can do that on Spotify by just on mobile. You can scroll up to the top of the podcast page and you'll find a little spot you can leave reviews. It helps people find the podcast in the future, so we really appreciate those 5-star ratings. You can go and follow us on social media, on X/Twitter. You can find us there, or on Instagram. Our handle is just @AirtimeTraveler on both of those sites. And I think that's pretty much everything. I know we've said we're talking about roller coaster announcements, and still got a trip report from Lagoon. I promise they will come at some point. Life is just crazy with the upcoming baby. So
upcoming, she better come.
Just be patient with us as we navigate life with a second child.
You can be patient. I'm not going to be patient.
Oh, so. Haley hasn't been patient for weeks now, so just be patient with us as we navigate this new phase in our life. But we promise we'll still keep bringing you content, and looking forward to it. So thank you for tuning in to this episode, and we will see you in the next one.